Focus today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson. And of course, last Friday, the Supreme Court ended its session, and on its way out of town, so to speak, it released a lot of decisions, and some were pretty monumental. A lot of them having to do with a rising concern lately of these lower courts imposing these injunctions on the president. I'm very delighted to have back with us today Keith Gross. He's an entrepreneur, a pilot. He and I got that in common. He's an attorney, conservative activist, and the author of Dirt Roads to Runways and Defending the American Dream for the Next Generation. He does have a website, and that's keithgross.com, and there's a picture of the landing page. That's keithgross.com. Keith, good to see you. How are you, friend?
Doing well. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Well, what did you think of the decision Friday to go after these lower courts and limit their actions?
Well, I was pretty happy with the majority decision. I thought it was really late coming, but better late than never, right? Because the way we've been operating for a while is we essentially needed the president to get unanimous consent from, I think it's 677 district judges, because in the recent past, if any one of those district judges believed they had an excuse to stop the president from performing his duties, they would just issue a nationwide order. And that is not the way it was originally intended for them to exercise their jurisdiction. So it was a good thing to see the Supreme Court finally bring that back and tell them that their jurisdiction is limited, as it should be.
Okay, so how do they put teeth into this? Because normally the jurisdiction of the district court, if I understand, has to be described by Congress, but the Supreme Court kind of stepped ahead and did this ruling. So how do they back this up?
Well, that's sort of the thing, is that while the jurisdiction of the district court is generally defined by Congress, Congress never granted to the district court the authority to create nationwide temporary restraining orders in the first place. That's sort of a judicial theory that got extended step by step over the last several years. The Supreme Court's now making it clear that that is not appropriate with respect to actions of the executive branch. They are sort of reestablishing some of the key ideas of the separation of powers that our founders clearly outlined in our Constitution.
Okay, so this is obviously very healthy. In the meantime, it leaves the Supreme Court with the issues of just the ruling at hand. And one of those that didn't get ruled on was the president's request about rescinding the birthright citizenship. Where do you think that's going to go?
You know, I think there are a lot of arguments that will have to play out on both sides, with the argument that the Justice Department's making, and that's the way I view it as well. The 14th Amendment was never intended to allow for citizenship to be granted to the children of illegal aliens who are here without the consent of our government. In prior cases, which the left likes to cite little clippets out of, those prior cases often hinged on consent of the government with respect to the presence of the parents of the potential citizen child. So one of those famous cases is called Wong Kim Ark. And in that case, they made it pretty clear that the 14th Amendment wouldn't grant citizenship rights to, say, the children born to an invading army that was occupying our nation, nor would it grant citizenship to the children of ambassadors or staff at the embassy of a foreign nation that happened to be inside our borders. It was only intended to grant citizenship to people born to either U.S. citizens or people who are within our borders with permission of the government.
So, you think the president wins on this one down the road?
I think ultimately, yes, the president does win on this one down the road. And the interesting thing is just how it got to this point in the first place. We had several past presidents who just misinterpreted and wrongly interpreted these provisions. And now there's this idea that, well, it's how we've been doing it, so it's how we should continue doing it. That's a really bad reason to do anything. So I look forward to having this situation straightened out. It's one of the best things about having Donald Trump in the presidency. We've got a president who isn't bound by status quo or tradition necessarily. He's going to look at the document and say, well, I don't care that they've been doing it wrong for the last 20 or 50 years. This is how it's supposed to be done. This is how we're going to do it.
I want to come back to the injunctions, Keith, just for a moment. They seem to, I think maybe I got the number wrong, but I thought I saw the number 43 injunctions against this president in the last 6 months. Could be a few more, a few less. Nonetheless, they all seem to be political. What does that tell you?
That tells me that this decision should have happened a long time ago. These district judges have been jumping in and writing thinly veiled political opinions that essentially block the executive branch from performing their duties. It seems that every time the president does anything, even if it's well within his executive power, the courts are quick to jump in and tell the president he's not allowed to do that, even when they know they're likely to be overruled by appellate courts. We as citizens experience this same thing from time to time, where if we had to make a claim, it might take years to work through the court system. But when you're the president, you have only 4 years to enact your administrative agenda. So every day that goes by, you've lost some of your presidential term. A president can't afford to wait around for something to work through the court system for years. This Supreme Court decision will go a long way to empowering the Trump administration to enact their agenda.
Okay, and the last, I guess, question concerning this, this is a huge decision for the president to continue to govern for what he feels he was elected to do. What's left in the left's playbook if they can't use these injunctions? Where do you think they're going to go after him next?
Well, I think they're going to block legislative action. If they're not able to stop him from taking executive orders and using those to properly run the executive branch, then the left's just going to be obstructionist in Congress. We're seeing that already with Chuck Schumer demanding that a really long bill be read aloud by the clerks. He totally wasted the clerks' time for days reading a really, really long piece of legislation. And that was just a gamesmanship play. I mean, personally, I wish they would read every bill aloud on the floor, because then maybe they'd start writing a little less of these laws that interact with and interfere with Americans' lives. But Chuck Schumer's playing games. That's the real issue here.
Do you think the average American citizen saw what's going on with these injunctions?
Yeah, I do. I think that even the average American citizen sees that for a long period of time, the presidency has been diminished by the legislature and the courts. And each of these other branches of government have sort of chipped away at the president's power, to the point that the president had almost no power, that they're just a vassal for the legislature and the courts. That's not how it's supposed to be. We're supposed to have 3 separate branches of government, and the judicial branch, according to Federalist Paper number 78, was supposed to be the weakest branch because it has no power to enforce the law and it has no power to write the law. But for a long time, the judicial branch has really tried to rewrite the laws written by Congress. It's not how it's supposed to work.
So the number 6-3 is pretty significant on this, isn't it?
Unfortunately, yes. I believe in the law. I believe in the impartiality of justice, but increasingly we are seeing partial justice in some ways. I think we're seeing a lot of ideological splits, and that's one of the concerning things about the decisions by Justice Jackson. She writes things that just indicate she has no good understanding of the Constitution. One of the most alarming statements I recall her making was in reference to the First Amendment. She said, well, that seems like it's really unduly hamstringing the government. Yes, ma'am, that is exactly the point of the First Amendment. It's to stop the government from interfering with our free speech and other rights. So when you have a justice sitting on the Supreme Court that just has a fundamentally incorrect view of the U.S. Constitution, that's pretty alarming.
How alarming is it when these justices, when they write their opinion, that they're calling out their fellow justices in the opinion?
That's not exactly a new idea, and to some extent it's helpful, to the broader legal community, to Americans at large. It's good to know how these justices are thinking, and I appreciate their transparency. Whenever they start to mock each other a little bit, I suppose that would be a way I wouldn't approach it. It seems that we should be professional and kind, even to those we vehemently disagree with. But it's important to call out these fundamental incorrect views held by some justices.
Okay, one other question, and then I want to get to your book real quick. If there is a rogue district judge that still files an injunction past this point, what's the consequences?
Well, for a long time, the left was screaming that Trump was going to create a constitutional crisis. But the reality is that crisis has always been caused by the courts overstepping their authority and essentially stealing power from the executive branch. So if a district court does issue some order that's currently prohibited under this decision, it would historically be the sort of thing that would be taken up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court would be expected to discipline the lower court judge. What could be sort of uncharted waters is to prosecute that judge and declare that judicial immunity does not apply to things when they knowingly operate outside the bounds of their lawful authority. That could be a violation of several laws.
Okay, that's interesting. That's yet to be seen. I want to come to your book quickly. Dirt Roads to Runways. That's pretty intriguing for us pilots. What's your message here about the American dream?
You know, the message is I grew up in a family that had absolutely nothing but love and faith, and I went on to found several national companies and had a really blessed career in business. And if I can do that, I didn't have any special tools. I didn't have anything. If I can do that, anyone can do that. But I see on a day-to-day basis that the freedoms that allowed that to happen are being chipped away. They're being chipped away by the courts and by legislative action. It's important that at this point in our history, we sort of restore our constitutional way of running government, that we get Washington out of our lives so that future generations can have the success I've enjoyed.
Do you think there's with all this stuff that's going on, from our lawfare to global unrest, that there is a genuine rebirth of understanding, appreciating, and defending freedom?
In a lot of ways, I think there is. You know, we're seeing that domestically here. Young kids, Generation Z, they're skewing further to the right, which these days, right means that you believe in the Constitution and fundamental freedoms and individual accountability. And so seeing that skew happen is really refreshing, because for a long time it seemed that younger generations were going really far left. And I think every college student generally thinks of themselves as a Democrat until they grow up and start paying taxes and realize that the government's not very good at keeping up with our money.
So how would you describe today, with your experience in writing a book, what is the American dream to you?
I think the American dream is to come from nothing and build a successful life. It's to have a home and provide for your children, and in short, to make sure that the next generation has it better than you had it. You know, we look at our past history in our nation, and 100 years ago, it was a pretty rough place. People had a lot less comfort than they have now. So I think overall, America has worked well in that regard. We have a very comfortable life thanks to our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. So I hope to see that legacy continue.
What do you fly?
Oh, I fly a Phenom 100 and a Cirrus SR-22. Those are my favorites.
Really? How do you like the Cirrus?
I love it. You know, the Cirrus is an amazing aircraft. It's a 4-seat piston aircraft, for those of you that aren't familiar. It's got an onboard parachute that will bring the entire aircraft down in one piece in the event of an engine failure. So it's a lot of peace of mind that you can pop that chute even if you're over the mountains, and you'll come down safe and sound. Do
you like the side stick?
I do actually like the side stick, and I always flew aircraft before the Cirrus that had a center-mounted yoke like most aircraft do, and I thought the side stick would be more of a distraction than it was, but within an hour of flying, it felt perfectly natural.
I had to get that in there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So where can people get your book, Keith?
So the book, Dirt Roads to Runways, it's found anywhere books are sold. So Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, anywhere like that. It's also an audio book on Audible.com.
Okay, and Keith has a website, keithgross.com, and there's a picture of the landing page. Thank you, friend, for your time. Let's stay connected. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Bye, everyone.
All right, God bless.